Okay, so going to the third reason why we use literature to teach language is the language enrichment. Literature provides learners with a wide range of individual lexical or syntactic items. So when you say lexical, these are the meaning we give to a particular word. Okay, so definitions coming from the dictionary, or syntactic items. When we say syntactic syntax, it's about the creation. How do we put words together to create a sentence which has a meaningful meaning there? Okay. Students become familiar with many features of the written language when they are reading, right? And then reading a substantial and contextualized body of text. They learn about the syntax and the discourse functions. Now, when we say discourse, these are like how do we communicate? This is communication of thoughts or words. When we talk, when we converse, that is a discourse, okay? So the discourse functions of sentences, the variety of possible structures. So we are not limited to just a single structure. Example, we just say, Paul visits the park. We can also say the park was visited by Paul. We can also say, we can also include adjectives like Paul excitedly visits the park. Okay, so that's the example of having different structures in a particular in just a single idea. Now the different ways of connecting ideas. How do we connect ideas? We're not Sometimes Filipinos, we connect ideas differently. Okay, British people connect ideas differently. Australian, they connect ideas differently. That's why we are using literature from the particular language target that we have. So which develop and enrich their own writing skills. Students also become more productive and adventurous when they begin to perceive the richness and diversity of the language they are trying to learn and begin to make use of some of that potential themselves. So once they are exposed, they become more productive and they become more adventurous. They do things sometimes which is beyond the instructions or the tasks that a teacher particularly gives them. Okay, so there, and thus they improve their communicative and cultural competence in the authentic richness, naturalness of the authentic texts. It's not, it's not really, the word is not fake, but it's not very shallow. There's a depth on the activities that they begin to work on because they have their language is already enriched through the exposure, their exposures to the literary texts coming from your target language country or country language. Okay, and there's naturalness. It's not fake. It's not saying halo halo is translated into mix mix. Okay, so instead of saying mix mix, sometimes we say people use different translations to that. Example, Taiwanese, they call it cold soup or iced soup. Okay, so it's more natural coming from that particular target country. And number four, we teach literature or we use literature to teach language because of personal involvement. Literature can be useful in the language learning process owing to the personal involvement it fosters in the reader. Presenting literary works really gets the attention of the student. Thus, they give in their personal involvement. Their involvement is more personal. Once a student reads a literary text, he begins to inhabit the text. Okay, so he is drawn into the text. Understanding the meanings of lexical items or phrases becomes less significant than pursuing the development of the story. So this time, we're not just on the definition of the terms used, but then the students now are really into the story, into the how the story is being developed, what will happen next, and that happens during the unfolding of the climax. And then he is thinking maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen. Okay, so he feels close to certain characters and he shares or they share their emotional responses also. This can have beneficial effects upon the whole language learning process, okay? Because they're more attached to the characters. At this juncture, the prominence of the selection of a literary text in relation to the needs, expectations, and interests, language level of students is already evident. Okay, so in this process, he can remove the identity crisis and develop into an extrovert. They're no longer introverted persons here or people here because they become one with the character. They adjust or they empathize with the character, and thus they somehow understand a part of them through literary works because they are more personally involved in the story. Okay. Now we have here Malley in 1989. He lists some of the reasons for regarding literature as a potent resource in the language classroom as follows. So we have the universality, the non-triviality, the personal relevance, variety, interest, economy, and suggestive power and ambiguity. Let's tackle first the universality. Now, universality, because we are all human beings. The themes literature, we use literature. Why? Because we are all human beings, and the different themes in literature actually is common to all of us. Example, the way we treat death. We all have experienced death, not us per se, but people around us, people we know, people who are not close with us also. And then we might have differences in how we treat them, but then there's still a similarity. Okay, so we understand death. And then love also. We're not limited to just the love, the romantic love that you're talking about, but then into different types of love. And then separation, not the separation only with your exes, but then the separation with your old friend, the separation from a certain toy that we have, a separation from a certain practice that we used to have. So we tackle them in a different way, but then we have commonality when it comes to these themes. Okay, so there's universality. Everybody experiences death, love, separation, belief, and we all experience nature. It's either the having something or the lack of it. Okay, so these experiences all happen to human beings. That's why it's universal. Okay. So next is the non-triviality. Now, when you say triviality, it's the lack of seriousness or importance or its insignificance. Okay. So it's not insignificant, meaning it is significant. Okay. Meaning it is serious. Okay. So many of the more familiar forms of language teaching inputs tend to trivialize text or experience. Familiar forms of language teaching. Example, Paul walks, let's say Betty rides a bus to school. Okay, so Betty rides a bus to school is just a sentence made to present to you certain lexical patterns, syntactic patterns of a certain sentence. How do we form this particular sentence? But then, if we don't know Betty, and who cares about Betty riding a bus to school, right? So, literature, on the other hand, is serious. It's trivial. Why? Because literature does not trivialize or talk down. It is about things which mattered to the author when he wrote them. Every word's put into writing by the author has a particular reason or meaning why they put it there. It may offer genuine as well as merely authentic inputs. That's why it's very authentic. A certain decision why you use in and into and on has a meaning. Um, Using a different spelling, example, climbing. Instead of climbing, we use climbing. There's also a reason why the author chose that particular word than the other. Okay? So there is seriousness in all of the words put together by the writer. It's not just a simple sentence which doesn't make sense. It's not just a simple piece of writing which doesn't make sense. It always makes sense. That's why it is effective as a tool to teach language. Next is personal relevance. Since it deals with ideas, things, sensations, we're talking about literature and events which either constitute part of the reader's experience or which they can enter into imaginatively, they are able to relate it to their own lives. Example, if your teacher tells you a story about her life or her experiences, you're all ears, right? Why? Because there's meaning to all of it. It's not just that we're going to learn something, but then we're also intrigued. Okay, we can enter into the life of our teacher. What happened to her during that day? What did she experience? Maybe I'm getting something from this. Okay, we all have different reasons why we listen to that particular story. We also have our own reason why we read a particular Wattpad or why we do a certain thing. Okay, why we watch a particular movie. Okay, because, well, most of us, we are able to relate to the lives of the characters there. Personal relevance. That's why it's relevant. Nobody cares about Betty riding on the bus. But then, if there's a story on why Betty took a bus, then maybe your readers can connect to that particular literary work. Next up is variety. Literature includes within it all possible varieties of subject matter. It is, in fact, a battery of topics to use in English language teaching. Within literature, we can find the language of law and of mountaineering, of medicine, and of bullfighting, of church sermons and nursery talk. We use literature because, well, there's like an array of a variety of topics that we can use in different topics that we are going to teach. If it's about life, if it's about love, if it's about numbers, if it's about pronunciation, if it's about rhyming, if it's about overcoming adversities or problems we encounter in life, we have literary work for almost everything. Okay, proof of that, just go Google something, and then a lot of suggestions can actually be presented to you. Okay, so next is interest. Now, literature deals with themes and topics which are intrinsically interesting. Okay, when you say intrinsically interesting, it's not just extrinsic, wherein your teacher has to force you to study something, okay, or to read something. No, when we read something, we our attention and our involvement and our interest is actually grabbed. Why? Because part of it is part of human experience. That's one thing, and then it treats them in ways designed to engage the reader's attention. Writers, authors of literary work are trained or they know how to grab the reader's attention. Example, you. During your high school days, you were taught how to write a good essay, right? So, on the introduction alone, you're taught how to grab the attention of the reader. And then, as we go on with the story, you are also taught and helped by the plot of the story, like how can you keep a hold on the attention of the reader. Okay, and they will tell you, they will keep asking for more, what happens next. Okay, now sixth is economy and suggestive power. One of the great strengths of literature is its suggestive power. Even in its simplest forms, it invites us to go beyond what is said to what is implied. Since it suggests many ideas with few words, literature is ideal for generating language discussion. Maximum output can often be derived from minimum input. Now, literary works have their suggestive power, as you had in your in your pretest. We cannot give just a single definition into a certain thing that we are reading. Now, example of maximum output can often be derived from minimum output is an essay wherein a single quotation can actually generate an entire essay. So we sometimes give motivation to students. So in form of quotation or a line, And then what we do is we discuss. So we like have a thorough discussion over that single line or quotation. So that's an example of maximum output can often be derived from minimum output. And seventh, we have ambiguity. It is highly suggestive and associative. Literature speaks subtly different meanings to different people. It is rare for two readers to react identically. Oh, there. It is rare for two readers to react identically to any given text. In teaching, this has two advantages. The first advantage is that each learner's interpretation has validity within limits. Okay, so when your student reads something and then they interpret it in a particular way, no one can say, no, that's wrong. Why? Because he's reading it and understanding it in a different light. That is based on his experiences, on his knowledge, on how he was taught, and how he feels during that time. The second advantage is that an almost infinite fund of interactive discussion is guaranteed since each person's perception is different. Wow. So example of this is debate, or like when you present a certain topic and then everyone discuss about it in there. So they began to compare and contrast experiences, and then they also sometimes give rebuttals and ask questions. Okay, so that no two readers will have a completely convergent interpretation establishes the tension that is necessary for a genuine exchange of ideas. It's not just okay, it's not just always yes, it's not just always you're correct. Then sometimes we say, well, you have a point there. However, now that is a very good conversation starter, and that is a very good venue for your students to practice their communicative competence. Okay? So there, that is why literature really is an effective tool to be used in our language classrooms. Okay, so that's it. Let's cut it here.